What if I told you we could solve one of the world's leading contributors to our global climate crisis by something as simple as eating cookies? Picture this. I'm 20 years old. I'm working as a waitress at a restaurant. And every single night, I witness anywhere from 30 to 40 pounds of food being tossed in the trash. And just to be clear, this is not the scraps on people's plates, nor is this anybody's leftover food. This was perfectly untouched food directly from the pot that was simply oversupplied on, neglected, and left to be thrown away. And every day seeing this, it ate at me more and more. Now, growing up, I had a single mom who had worked really hard to ensure that we had enough food. So from a very young age, I had learned the high value of food because my family and I had just enough to get by. So the idea of wasting food was completely unimaginable. Now, fast forward to when I get a job working in the restaurant industry as a waitress, I was shocked to see how much food was being wasted on a daily basis. And I was wondering why nobody else was stopping this from happening. Not my managers, not the chefs, not my coworkers. But I was pointing the finger at everybody else except myself. But it wasn't until I was stumbling through Instagram and I saw a photo on my newsfeed that happened to change the course of my entire life. It was this black and white portrait of a man holding a sign that said, "I always wondered why someone didn't do something about that." And then I realized I was somebody. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I've always had this mentality that if something's wrong, somebody else will fix it. If something's not right, somebody else will take care of it. It's similar to when you're driving on a highway, you see a fire, but you don't call the police because you assume that somebody else already has. But it's because everyone has that mentality that that's how the fire burns out of control. The bystander effect. Similarly, I had that mentality, but I finally had to surrender to this idea that somebody else out there is going to solve this food waste problem. Because if not me, then who? If not now, when? So finally, at one point, I got so frustrated, and I couldn't witness my chef throwing out any more perfectly untouched rice. So again, towards the end of the night, I see him headed for the trash, but this time I screamed at him, and I was like, "Wait, chef, stop! Don't throw it out!" I'm like, "We've got to do something about this." And he stopped with a pot full of hot rice in his hands, exhausted from a long, hard day at work. And he looked me directly in the eyes. He looked at me like I was a little crazy, and he goes, "Ray, what the hell are you gonna do with 50 pounds of cooked rice?" And honestly, I had no idea. And now the ball's in my court, I'm thinking, great, now what? So, together with my friend and my coworker, Chrissy, she was the other waitress who was also really bothered about what we were seeing night after night, her and I got together and we did some research. And we found that there is a direct correlation between food waste and our current climate crisis. We also found that rice happens to be the #1 wasted food in the restaurant industry. Almost every restaurant has it. It's prepared in large quantities to ensure that they don't run out, especially towards the end of the night. And towards the end of the night, if it's not all consumed, they typically just toss it. But this results in an excessive amount of food waste. We dove even deeper, and we partnered with CalRecycle, and we found that just one large restaurant chain can waste up to 7 million pounds of perfectly edible rice annually. Why? Because it was oversupplied on, and nobody stepped in to find a solution. Now, to put that into perspective, that is enough rice to feed over 35 million people. And when we waste food, we're not just wasting food, we're wasting all of the resources that were used to produce that food. Now that's 2.1 billion gallons of fresh water used to harvest that rice that is now wasted. That is enough water for over 3 million people for a week. And when food sits in a landfill, it rots. And that is 500,000 pounds of methane that's released into our atmosphere. And methane is known as one of the most harmful greenhouse gases that traps heat and contributes to climate change. Now, why does all of this matter? By 2050, there will be 10 billion people on this earth. So, issues regarding food security, environmental sustainability, the plastic epidemic, global hunger, will affect every corner of this earth. Put simply, without a wholesome reevaluation of how we deal with waste, these issues will become inescapable. Now, the restaurant industry is just one way in which we might begin to change waste management habits. And we realized, if we do, we have the potential of creating a new movement, because this is a 100% solvable problem. But to be frankly honest with you, at that time, we had no idea how we were going to solve it. So initially, I begged my management team, and I begged for them to donate the rice instead of them throwing it away. But they refused over fear of legal repercussions that if someone were to eat the donated food, would become sick and sue. Now, I can bet that a majority of us have heard that one before. I know I sure did. But I am here today to tell you that that is a myth, because I then attended a local food waste event where I learned that US restaurants are not liable and protected under federal law if they donate food. It's called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. In fact, there is a new California law called SB 1338 that is now mandating restaurants to reduce all of their edible food waste by 2050. Now get this, there has not been one filed lawsuit against any restaurant or food institution for someone suing due to becoming ill. So I was so excited, I found out all this new information. The next day I rushed to my management team and I throw it on their desk and I go, look, see, you're not liable. But they still refused over the additional burden that they claimed it created. And truthfully, I don't blame them, because restaurant workers are worked to the bone, so any additional burden just seemed unfeasible to them. But after being persistent and begging them, they were open to letting us take it. So still very determined, Chrissy and I thought to take the rice to all of the expected places that you'd think to take donated food. We contacted homeless shelters, food banks, community centers, local businesses, even churches. But many of these places refused to take the rice because dealing with hot, cooked food is really difficult, and it usually needs to be consumed within 24 hours, which creates this huge headache when it comes to logistics. And honestly, at that point, we were really starting to feel defeated, frustrated, lonely. It felt like we were climbing this upwards battle that really wasn't getting anywhere. But right when we were at the brink of giving up, we realized donating the food wasn't the best solution, because all that really did was move the problem around and deflect ownership onto others. So to truly solve this issue, we saw an opportunity to create a food rescue business that educates the world about food waste. Because if you think about it, waste is only waste if someone wastes it. This became our opportunity to challenge others to completely rethink the negative stigma around waste. And that was the birth of upcycling for us. Not recycling, upcycling. Now, the difference between recycling and upcycling is that in recycling a material, such as glass, you might melt down the glass to make new glass objects. So new glass bottles and jars from old ones. In upcycling, the point is to take something old and no longer wanted and repurpose it into something new, more valuable, or something that serves some more worthwhile function. So rather than turning old glass bottles into new glass bottles for single use, upcycling would repurpose the glass into lanterns or vases, something that serves some more worthwhile function and has a longer life. Now we are upcycling food to a higher and better purpose rather than disposing and creating more landfill burdens. And today, we partner with some of the largest restaurant chains in the nation, and we rescue the excess staple ingredients that they consistently oversupply on, such as rice, and we figured out a way to repurpose it into our first launched product, which is delicious and better for you cookies. And after tons, and I mean tons, of trial and error and recipe testing, endless nights trying to figure out how to give this rice a second life, we began surrounding ourselves with incredible mentors, and we finally figured out a way to repurpose all of the food that we're now recovering by dehydrating it, milling it into a flour, to upcycle and bake into our cookies. And as we've grown, now we don't just stop at rice nor cookies. We've been able to rescue juice pulp from juice bars, coffee grounds from coffee shops, almond waste from almond milk companies, all of which we use to flavor and upcycle into our different products. And I'm standing here today as a transformative waitress, happy to announce that Soulmuch, the company that we founded, has now rescued over 40,000 pounds of food in just 4 years, and we are just getting started. Yeah. Because on the surface, yes, we may be selling cookies, sure. However, our mission is so much greater than that. We hope to build an educational campaign around upcycling and inspire our customers, other entrepreneurs, business leaders, parents, educators, students, members of the community, and every single one of you to rethink waste into the novel idea of upcycling. Now imagine if we, just two ordinary waitresses, can do this in the food industry. Imagine what you can do in other industries. And we're not the only ones who decided to create a solution when there wasn't one. There are thousands of other organizations, initiatives, companies that are tackling the issues of waste, such as Indosol, tackling the 1 billion waste tire problem generated every year worldwide by upcycling tires into sandals. And thus far, they've repurposed over 120,000 tires into footwear. These high school teens are addressing the single-use plastic bag issue by upcycling them into sleeping mats for the homeless. Now, each one of these sleeping mats keeps hundreds of plastic bags out of our waste streams. This bright young girl has collected 12,000 plastic bottle caps to build prosthetic hands for kids. She partnered with an organization called Envision Hands, and collectively as a whole, they have repurposed 5 million caps while providing hands for kids in need. Even on a corporate scale, Delta decided to upcycle all of their old flight attendant uniforms into new backpacks and toiletry bags. So rather than disposing of 1 million old uniforms to just sit and rot into a landfill, they found a unique solution that has now influenced other major airlines to follow. United and Alaska are now upcycling all of their old airplane leather seats into wallets and totes. Now, the common thread between all of these is that they were started by people, just like you, just like I, who are frustrated witnessing waste within their industry. So they channeled that into innovative solutions that is now having great impact. I cannot stress this enough. It is so important to listen to that voice within you. Use that anger, use the frustration that you feel with the state of the world, with our politicians, with companies, and harness it to propel you to want to create action. So now that you know the power of upcycling, what will you rescue next? The next time you're throwing away an almond milk carton, browning bananas, old clothes, even a wine bottle, I challenge you, just for a moment, to think of the second life that that item could have. Think of how you could be an upcycler yourself. How could you make changes around your house? How could you influence your friends, your family? How could you take this to work? Who would you inspire along the way? I mean, the possibilities go on and on. This is a movement that you get to be a part of. So, rather than thinking of this as a climate crisis that brings anxiety and it's paralyzing, I encourage you all to shift your perspective. And I want to invite you to reframe your mind to looking at this as a climate revolution. Because this is truly one of the greatest opportunities of our generation. And we get to come up with the innovations and the solution using our own creativity. How empowering is that? So, the next time that you see an opportunity to create change, don't wait for somebody else to do it, or even assume that somebody else will take the lead. Because your simple actions can lead to an entirely new upcycling movement. You are the person you are waiting for. And just remember, even waste deserves a second chance. Thank you.